Thank you for joining us. This is Paul Wilson.
And Chris Hemke.
And you're listening to the Diesel Performance Podcast. Guys, it has been a great year for Diesel Performance Podcast.
Yeah.
And I just want to kick off the top of the show by saying thank you to all of the listeners and all of the participants, everybody who came on the show. Honestly, it really makes us very happy to be able to do this.
There's a couple of things, like you said, Paul, the listeners, not only the listeners that download our podcast and listen to us every week, but the listeners that then want to engage on the Diesel Performance Podcast page.
Yep.
Right? And tagging us and asking good questions. It's awesome. It's good to see that. And then, like you said, the interviewees, or interviewers that take the time to be with us and, talk about what we enjoy, diesel. Right?
Yeah.
Might not necessarily be performance. A lot of different perspectives, or there's different levels, when we talk about diesel, from the engineering side, tuning, OEM or aftermarket, R&D on parts, maintenance, fuel additives, the type of fuel, DEF fluid, just all these different attributes that come into what we all know and love, which is diesel.
Yeah. So. Absolutely. No, I think that's a really good way to put it. It's that passion for diesel that drives the show. It's that passion for this that is why we're still doing this after, God, I think we're 5 years in now.
That's great. Time flies. It really, really flies.
We were just looking at some end of year numbers. Over 500,000 downloads this year, which is just crazy to me. So it's very humbling, and again, just thank you to everybody who's involved. It really means a lot to us. Chris, over at Duramax Tuner, one of the things I know we've been talking a lot about is the stealth boost testers and how those are very unique to the market. Yeah. You want to just give our listeners just a quick rundown of why we love that product? So,
the stealth boost testers are going to be specific to a few RPO, Duramax, and Cummins. And the idea here is as over at Calibrated Power Duramax Tuner, our stealth line has grown amazingly well over the years. It's very well received in the market. We do a lot of turbo manufacturing. That means we have a lot of customers that buy turbochargers, and we have guys that will call in. And it's been this way for years, even before we were doing turbos in our tuning side of things. But we'll have guys call in saying that their truck is underpowered, or their truck is smoky, or the truck just isn't running as well as it should. We've even seen it in the past where we've had guys come into the shop to get a truck diagnosed, and it's been to multiple shops, or even the dealer rather, and they could never figure out what was going on. And a simple tool that I think every diesel owner needs is a boost tester. And what that does is it checks the air charge system. Now, you get the famous, my truck makes X amount of boost. Right? Well, I can't hear a leak. That's bullshit. That doesn't mean anything. You got to actually pressurize the air charge system to ensure that there is no boost leaks. Now, traditionally, you would go through the charge pipe, which is the intercooler pipe off of the discharge of your compressor housing of the turbo. It's been a great option, but you still leave out the actual turbocharger, which you could potentially have a leak with the compressor cover to the center section.
Do you know, it's funny you bring that up, Chris. I was talking to the guys back in the Stealth Turbo Manufacturing Center, and they were talking about getting brand new turbos in, like brand new off-the-shelf chargers, and pressure testing on the actual turbo, and the turbo leaking, the seal where the compressor cover mounts to the housing, that seal actually leaking under pressure. And you start to think, you're like, how many guys have a small leak they don't know about?
Right. So what this does is the Stealth Boost Tester is going to boost test your entire air charge system. So if you have a Duramax from 2001 to 2021, we have a boost test kit for you. If you have a Cummins from 1989 to 2021, we have a boost test for you.
Just released that.
And then we have some Ford stuff in the works here that will be coming out in the future. But what this does is it allows you to boost the entire air charge system. So as long as you have a stock appearing style turbo, doesn't matter if it's a Stealth or, a different aftermarket drop-in turbo that is Holset or Garrett.
That's right. If it runs a stock intake.
Yep, a stock intake, it will work. And of course, stock turbocharger or our Stealth brand, the boost tester will work, and it's affordable and it's really easy to use.
Yeah.
But it's a peace of mind. So it's turbo health is the best way to put it, because too many times you see turbochargers fail. If they fail, that means it's premature, in my opinion. I don't care how old the truck is. If it fails, why did it fail? Okay. Yeah. And you start to see a lot of, overspeeding issues. Well, it might not necessarily mean that your boost gauge is going to show that the turbo over boosted, but you're seeing a boost reference, right? And the turbocharger is spinning. And if there is an air leak or air can escape to the atmosphere, the turbo is going to be overspeeding to,
compensate for that loss.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a really cool tool. Like I said, I mean, any diesel enthusiast, any diesel owner, I think, it's something that you need. And, you do a boost leak down test, every oil change, every other oil change, just to make sure you're good.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really good advice, the maintenance on it.
Yeah.
One of the other things I would say that I thought really stood out to me about that kit is not only is it the only kit that actually includes the turbocharger with your test, but also that it's made of extremely high-quality components. Yep. So we've seen cheap pressure gauges fail. Oh, yeah. We've seen cheap boots come apart. We've dug through a box of PVC fittings to try to match something together to redneck tech it to make it work. Yeah. We've been there. We've done that. And there's a reason that the guys in our shop love the kit. Yeah. And there's a reason that I know you as an end user or a shop owner, I know you're going to love the kit as well. So, yeah, definitely check those out. Speaking of high-quality products from a high-quality source, that's why we work with WCFAB and Exergy Performance. Chris and I have been promising we're going to do a fuel additive episode. Winter is finally fully upon us up here in northern Illinois.
Snow outside and all.
I can't get rid of that 2 inches of ice on my driveway now. And, of course, all the gas stations near me are sold out of salt.
Of course.
Way cool.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no worries.
'Tis the season.
Now's the perfect time for us to do some real world application on the fuel additive in 2 different vehicles. I'm going to run it in my all stock X5 35D. And Chris, you're going to run it in your Cummins.
Yeah.
Maybe in the TDI?
The TDI, literally when we leave here, I'm going to throw some additive in there, fill the car up, and start collecting some data. I am very hands-on. I know how many miles that car goes per tank, what the car averages for fuel mileage, and I'm one with the car. So, you listen to the engine and know how it runs. Well, you do. You hear things. So, the TDI will be getting it first, of course, because that's my main winter commuter, and it'll be going in the truck as well. So I'm excited. I've heard some good feedback from customers already who we've gotten set up with it.
Yeah.
Read a couple things online and stuff like that. I've had a couple of in-depth conversations with the boys over at Exergy on it as well, which, we have future plans of getting them on the podcast and doing something like that. So I'm really excited. There's some good content to come.
Absolutely. Chris, this week we are going to take a look back at 2020, and that's really what I think. Guys, I know we're a whole week behind on getting this episode out, but it turned
you were on
into
vacation.
I took a vacation. I took a vacation.
Rightfully
also,
so.
It's a large project. So we really buried our editor, Justin, who we want to give a big shout out to.
Huge help.
Justin, you guys have heard Justin Tyson on the show. He's helped out with going to Diesel Power Challenge. He also edits every single episode. A lot of times in a very short amount of time with very little warning. So we really appreciate putting him through the ringer on that stuff, and we know he really knocks it out of the park. So big shout out to him. He did have a couple of notes as he was doing some of the editing for the clip show, Chris.
Okay.
Apparently, there's a few phrases that you and I say a lot.
I mean, I'll tell you right now, as I'm looking at this list, and we're going to go through them. There is one on mine that I would have to say Justin missed, but then I was thinking about it, I was like, maybe I didn't really say it that much in 2020.
What do you think it was?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah,
that was a bad one. 2019 past years, it was a bad one.
I edited the list and pulled out some of the verbal pauses, the verbal gaffes. I pulled some of those out because I'm like, I also say absolutely a lot is like passive tense of just to agree with somebody.
It's just an easy way to transition.
It is. So I pulled some of those out, but what I thought was funny is yours came up with, that's a robust platform. We would love, God, if you're really a nerd about the show, please go back, give us a rough number of what you think Chris Emke said, the reference of robust platform.
Yeah. The VP44 one, though, man, I mean, that's the easiest way to identify a 24-valve second gen, because if you say 24-valve, that could be common rail, that could be a lot of different things. So I don't agree with that one. We just must talk about second gens.
I understand, but if you're Justin and you're the one who had to go back and listen to
for sure
60-some episodes from last year, and you're like, man, Chris really says VP44 a lot.
Yeah.
I'd say that's probably pretty true.
Now, what I love about yours, Paul, okay, is every intro to someone we interview, how the hell are you, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is embedded into my brain, as I'm sure our listeners are as well. And, I love it. That's always something that, you kind of close out.
That is, I love it.
Identify what someone says.
Yeah, apparently that one comes up a lot.
And some wild stuff going on, huh? I think about that phrase and the blank stare. Like, you give me a look after you say that every time. So, I mean, Justin did well with that. I would have to agree with all of them.
Yeah, some of those are like, that's me. Yeah. That's me with excellent planning and execution.
Right, some wild stuff going on, huh? Is fuck, I didn't plan for this. This is my canned response.
What do you got?
Chris, it's you. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, throughout the year we had so many highlights. We legit sat down for an hour and talked about this stuff and could not come up with like a perfect plan to get everybody involved and get everything in that we wanted. So we wanted to kind of go through in a timeline wise and walk you through while we were looking back at the year, what stood out to us.
Yeah.
And first and foremost, KJ is always such a great guest to have on the show. He's always got really cool stuff to talk about, the Diesel Power Challenge stuff. And at this time last year, Diesel Power Magazine was going through a huge change.
Yeah.
So we want to give a jump back here to January 11th of 2020, and KJ Jones from Diesel Power Magazine telling us about the future of Diesel Power Magazine. We have KJ Jones from Diesel Power Magazine. KJ, how the hell are you?
Paul, I'm good. What's up, Chris? Happy New Year to you guys.
Yeah, thank you. You as well, man. You've been a busy guy lately.
No kidding.
Yeah, I'm always busy, but I guess maybe more busy than usual is a good way to put it.
Well, hey, it's been great to see all of your Facebook live feeds coming through.
Yeah.
I know I've been jumping on and watching those and getting some really good information there, and they're always a lot of fun. But I think one of the big things going on is we're going to start with Diesel Power Magazine changing their distribution model a little bit.
Yes, well, the distribution model has changed from being the print product or magazine that everyone has been familiar with for many years, for 15 years, and the change has taken that product and that content, the buzzword is content in this day and age, that content is now online. It's on the web. It's on the internet. It's available through your computer, your tablet, your phone, and however else you get any of your other content. There's just no longer a printed version of Diesel Power Magazine.
All right, man. January did not hold back. So big shock that they were going to stop printing.
Right.
I think the content's still great, to be
It
honest
is.
with you.
It really is.
I still follow them. I still read all the articles.
Even when the magazines were being published, I would go on dieselpowermagazine.com, and I was looking at reading articles. I mean, when I was younger, I collected every magazine, I was always a subscriber.
Right.
But, there were articles that I would remember just working here, and I'm like, I remember a truck years back, and I would look it up on their website.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't much of a transition for me. It stinks that when you go to, your local grocery store or something, that it's not sitting on the newsstand, but the content's still great. They're still killing it over there. So, hopefully, more future growth to come there.
Absolutely. Now, this is also pre-COVID. So at the time, we were still talking about Diesel Power Challenge 2020. We really didn't have any idea that it was going to be canceled.
Right.
So we had talked to Chris Patterson, who's somebody I got to meet at Diesel Power Challenge 2019. Great guy. Love giving Chris a hard time.
How much content, right? I know that we're going to go into this,
Yeah.
But Chris Patterson was everywhere on social media 2020 with his Cummins.
Yeah. Just another Cummins.
So he's one of those guys that I love to interview. We've interviewed him several times.
Yep.
And he is a man that is true to his word. Simple as that. And he is hyped. He is so excited about Diesel.
I think you're absolutely correct. Let's kick it back to January 24th. That's the first time we talked to Chris Patterson in 2020, and it was all about him still trying to get voted in. He was only an alternate with him, and is just another Cummins. So here we go.
So being an alternate, I feel, was quite the advantage for this year. I got to kind of go behind the scenes and see what it would really take to be competitive and how the truck reacted to the altitude that everybody seems to be really concerned about. Yeah, it was just another Cummins. So, yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Obviously, Richard will be the one guy that's coming back for this year. Do you think you have a bit of a competitive advantage over Richard, considering you've already seen him compete and he hasn't really got to watch to see what you can do out on the track?
Absolutely.
All right. Chris Patterson, wild and also not shy to call somebody out. That's what I love here.
Well,
but what's funny is he calls out Richard Coker, and, well, you know what? Let's kick it over to February 28th. Let's see what Richard Coker had to say about Chris Patterson calling him out. Real talk, you scared of Chris Patterson getting voted in? He's the only other one who's going to have seen the competition beforehand.
Hey, I'll stand behind Chris all day, every day. He's a top-notch guy, does a heck of a job, and I'll continue to support him. I think he's got a hell of a chance to come in, be competitive. He knows the drill. He's seen it. I'm all for it. I want to see him there this year, so I hope everyone gives him a vote and get him there.
I love it. Too nice of a guy to just call him out and be like, Chris is never going to win,
yeah.
right? I know, yeah. We were looking for a little bit of confrontation.
I was going to stir
there.
the pot, but Richard's also a nice guy. So.
He doesn't care. He doesn't care. Richard Coker's the world's nicest guy in diesel.
Genuine, down to earth, doesn't give a fuck, and he'll let the truck speak for itself.
Oh, yeah. Chris is a good guy. Good competitor. Come on, man. I really thought we had a fight going there. I really thought we were going to build up a fight there, and it did not work. Chris, one of our biggest episodes from all of 2020 came out to be DIY diesel fuck-ups. That was back, it was, turns out, on Valentine's Day. What do you want to say about that clip before we kick it over to him?
I think that episode as a whole, it resonates well with myself, and I think that's the reason why it's so popular, because being on the phones over at CPS, everyone talks about, can I do this myself? Or what objectives or what obstacles am I going to have to overcome with doing this install? And I can only think about what I do myself firsthand, and I know my mechanical inabilities.
Yeah.
Right? But we've seen some crazy stuff come in and out of the shop, and I'm not going to discredit anyone. Like, I'm not here to bash anyone. But the episode that, Jeremy, one of our shop techs did, hopefully we get him on for more episodes in the future.
Yeah.
It really highlighted some of those, what's in the real world.
And that's where I think Jeremy Garnett, our
great tech
over here at the shop. I think that's one of the unique spots about his job, where we get some local business and we do quite a few local trucks, but a lot of our vehicles, like a lot of our longer projects, get shipped in from across the country.
Some that have already been touched,
right?
Some that have not been touched.
And so with that, we get to see a wide range. Yeah. Like, the guy shipping his truck across the country usually has a little bit different budget than the kid coming in to get a turbo put
or slightly different patience.
Yes, right. So we get to see that kid who's been wrenching on his truck for a year, and now he's just stuck, and the project is stalled because he doesn't know what to do next. And we've also seen that guy bring his truck in and have no idea that anybody touched it before him, and no idea there was a problem underlying or lying underneath. So I think that's a really cool episode. We'll let Jeremy speak for himself. What's your experience around trucks and troubleshooting?
Started off when I was about 9 years old and was pushing a broom in a shop, and now I'm 38 years old and still doing it. So been around it my whole life, seen a lot of do's, seen a lot of don'ts, and seen a lot of fuck-ups.
And you have like electronic diag and like fabrication skills. I've seen you work on stuff like that in the past. I mean, you're well-rounded, to say the least.
Yeah, like when it comes to just putting things together, figuring things out. Example, right now I'm making a 47 RE, fitting a LV7 truck. So it's
so Dodge Trans into a Duramax chassis.
Mm-hmm.
What could go wrong?
Nothing, Paul.
It went together perfect.
Yeah, it actually looks really nice. Having the ability to go check it out. I mean, hats off to you, man.
Oh yeah, no, work came out very well. It's just trying to make like neutral safety switch work and reverse lights and make sure it starts in park.
And
not
all the little things.
Right. All those little details to button up, no big deal.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Wait, so you can't just buy the swap kit and just put it in?
No.
Oh, no.
But it comes with an install kit. You're done.
You got instructions, right?
No.
Oh, no.
There's a YouTube video, though.
Like a standard mechanic, he jumps on YouTube and figures it out. So
you get one of those. You see that switch up there?
Okay, well, we did bring Jeremy in today because he is an expert with this stuff. I know he's helped us out with troubleshooting stuff for customers in the past and things of that nature. I know one of the things that I've seen commonly guys do wrong at home is understand what a MAF sensor is or how it works or which orientation it goes. Can you talk a little bit about that, Jeremy? What have you seen and what are some of the common solutions for those common problems?
Well, a MAF sensor, reads the grams per second of how much airflow is going through the air filter into the truck. A lot of guys actually put them in backwards.
Yeah, very common.
That's what we see.
There's actually an arrow on it, and then they wonder why the truck's running wrong and things like that. Mass airflow sensors do go bad, then the truck's gonna smoke heavily, things like that.
You see times like oil filters and that debris getting on there.
Exactly.
And things like that.
Dirty air filters. I mean, we'll throw off a MAF reading huge. Clean air filters, the cheapest and best thing you could ever do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's such a no-brainer how much of our list today has to do with maintenance.
Yeah.
Right? Just like guys just skipping over simple maintenance. MAF, Chris, give us some of the symptoms customers call in with when they have a problem with the MAF sensor. What's the most common things they tell us?
Yeah, I think, usually guys will call in not knowing that they have a MAF issue.
Right.
And it boils down to truck not being responsive. And then you kind of hone into that one being, well, does a truck produce any smoke? Listeners out there, if the truck's smoky and not responsive, you have other problems. If the truck is not smoky, no smoke, and not responsive, chances are the truck's not getting the proper fueling. Right. Well, why isn't the truck getting the proper fueling? Well, that's because the MAF isn't reading the proper airflow coming in a Duramax or like in a 6.7 Power Stroke. Air through the MAF is how the engine fuels.
Right.
So
I think one of my keys to knowing I was dealing with a MAF issue has always been when somebody calls in and says, "Yeah, it's not responsive." I say, "Well, does it ever feel responsive? Like, does all the power come on?" They're like, "Well, yeah."
At like 2,000,
okay,
2,300.
Right. Does it all seem to come on at once like a freight train? Like you're running, it won't go anywhere, and then it slams like a big turbo, like a big single turbo hitting. They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Check your MAF." MAF being in backwards, there's an arrow. Guys still miss it. Easy way I always remember, the filament faces the filter.
Yep.
The filament faces the filter.
But I didn't get no codes.
Sometimes there is.
Sometimes there is. Sometimes there's not.
Well, sometimes there's two filaments, one on each side. Just remember, bigger one goes towards the front.
There you go.
Some aftermarket ones don't have an arrow. Bigger filament goes towards the front.
You got it.
And then the other thing too, just a little caveat on that, guys putting on different air intakes. I'm not, there's a lot of great aftermarket options, and some vendors, they might ever so slightly change the position of the MAF sensor or the inside diameter of that tube that they're putting on. Duramax guys put on them badass 5-inch intakes instead of the 4, like whatever. That changes the reading. The truck has to be rescaled and tuned for that. That changes how the truck fuels. So
100%.
Yeah.
We actually just ran into that case on that twin kit we put on that LML, that emissions compliant twin kit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had to use a factory air box because the aftermarket.
Yeah. It was reading different. Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
And you see that a lot with the newer, to kind of segment to that, the newer trucks like the 15 Ram or like our 1516 LML twin kit. We utilize the factory air box. The factory air box supplies enough air volume, first off, but we need that because of the factory scaling, to make sure that the truck is fueling properly. We're not too rich. So,
absolutely. All right, guys. We love doing episodes with other podcasts.
Yeah.
What's funny is the guys from Engine Noise podcast, who's a crossover show we did this year back in March. They really had so much faith in our technical aptitude to put together a crossover episode with 4 people on.
Yeah.
And it turns out that was before we had found Ringer.
Yeah.
That was before we had solved the iPhone into the board. We had all sorts of technical issues that we had just been hodgepodging it through for a few years to make this stuff work and really had never dove into fixing some of the actual technical stuff.
Yeah.
And we recorded the show with them, and their audio turned out to be better than our audio recording. But it was a great episode. They're such cool guys. I'm still a subscriber. Chris, do you listen to their show?
Yes, I do.
Awesome, man. Let's kick it over to them and give you guys a little taste of what that sounded like.
Welcome to the Engine Noise Podcast, brought to you by our awesome sponsor, OneAuto.com, a podcast for do-it-yourselfers like me who do not mind getting their hands covered in diesel fuel. I am your car guy and podcast host, Jeremy Nutt.
And I'm Matt Lantane, the co-host of Engine Noise Podcast, and I can't wait to fill my brain with some diesel knowledge.
Oh yeah, Matt, it's happening. Well, hey guys, thanks for calling in. This is Paul Wilson and Chris Emke from the Diesel Performance Podcast joining us on the Engine Noise Podcast today.
Jeremy and Matt, thank you so much for having us. This is Paul, and I'm Chris. Man, we're excited. You guys got a great show. I know I've definitely listened to a couple of episodes. I know Chris has checked it out. We're excited, man. It's not often we get to be a guest on a show.
Yeah, it's very exciting to have you guys on the show because I am not a diesel guy, but I am a car guy, so I can speak the lingo. But diesels have just never been something that I've gotten involved with. So I'm excited to learn a little bit and kind of see the diesel world through your eyes.
Me being not a diesel guy, and I'm more of the novice type guy where I can, change my brakes, I can change my oil, that kind of stuff. I'll start off with probably the number one question that you get all the time. Why the black smoke? And does a diesel burn cleaner than gas?
Now, I've heard that you guys have mentioned that this is like the number one question you get asked, especially by like novices or people not in the diesel world. So we figured we'd hit you with that one first.
No, it's a good question. It all comes down to how new it is and how it's set up. I mean, that's really what smoke comes down to. The big thing we've preached for the entire life of the podcast and probably our experience in diesel is that smoke is really wasted fuel. It's missed opportunity on horsepower. So if you got a really smoky truck, that means that we essentially just overfueled it. We just have a really, really rich mixture, and that's what you're seeing go off the tailpipe. So on like your normal street driving truck, there's no need to see any smoke. We get higher horsepower, better fuel mileage, better everything with no smoke than we do with smoke. If you're watching sled poles, you see a truck hooked to a giant sled being dragged through the dirt, you're going to see some smoke there just due to the load and that kind of specific situation. But other than that, we really don't have smoke anymore. That's something of the past. That's what the old dinosaur trucks are known for.
I've heard you guys talk about common rail and not common rail. Now, do you see the smoke happen more on non-common rail trucks?
Yes, it has to do with injection pressure. So with older technology, when we talk about like older 6.5 Chevy diesel or like 12-valve Cummins or the earlier 24-valve Cummins, they run like a 50 or 60 PSI injection pressure. It's extremely low, and it doesn't allow for the atomization in the cylinder to take place thoroughly. So that's where you see a lot of lead off, and then that's where you see a lot of that black smoke be produced. Over probably the last 20 years, where the common rail injection has been adopted into the light-duty pickups. Duramax was the first. Cummins followed suit, and then Ford was last to add that into their arsenal, if you will. The injection pressures have gotten higher and higher. So 23,000 PSI was the first variation of common rail injection in the Duramax, to now it's pretty much a standard to be around 30,000 PSI of injection pressure. So it's just all about atomizing fuel in the cylinder, and fuel pressure is what's allowing that to take place. I would say it's really similar to the concept between like an old mechanical carburetor and direct inject.
Right.
On a gas vehicle. It's just that old mechanical technology compared to new computer control technology.
Yeah, I would think to sort of simplify it in my own...
Yeah, Jeremy, please simplify it for me.
So
hold on. Sorry. So common rail, we're talking about like fuel rail.
Yep.
Okay, and this is how the gas is getting into the engine and how it's like spit there to burn.
Right.
Basically, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have an injection pump that turns fuel from low pressure to high pressure, and then that sits in an actual rail. That's where the common rail comes into play.
Okay.
And then off of that rail, there's X amount of injection lines, whether you have a 6-cylinder or an 8-cylinder, and that rail has constant pressure and feeds the lines going to the injector.
Aha.
So you're saying on the older trucks it was only like 60 PSI? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different variation to injection pressure, and how the older style trucks were set up is you had an injection pump, again, that turned pressure from a lower pressure to a higher pressure. But that injection pump would have 6 lines or 8 lines ran through it, and then you would have that line go directly to a mechanical injector that would open and close by pop-off pressure.
Chris Searle, UCC 2020.
Yeah.
This was a tough episode. This is when I think COVID and lockdowns really hit me as being real.
I remember the week prior to this, roughly, was when we were sitting in a meeting at our company.
Yeah.
And we were talking about what's going to happen in the weeks to come. right? So yeah, this is like, I get the chills thinking about March of 2020 and the turning point of what we thought life was and what life became. They were hopeful, you'll hear it in this podcast of what we were hoping was going to be the turnout going into UCC 2020.
Yeah.
And, we'll share a clip and just leave it at that.
20 or so vendors that, call me up and I'm like, well, what do you do? Well, we have, gutter-proof rain guttering or clutter-proof rain guttering, or we sell lights for houses. I'm like, yeah, well, we'll buy a space. Tell us how much. It's like, no, I'm sure you'll buy a spot, but that's not what we're creating here. So,
guys, I just got a message on the Facebook page the other day, Chris, at Duramax Tuner. A very nice gentleman was asking me what we have available for his, I think, 2005 6-liter Power Stroke. And I was like, oh, man, we got this great turbo. Yep. It's a Stealth 67 G2. It's really awesome. It's capable of 600 or 750 horsepower. It's a drop-in. It's stock appearing. You're going to love it. He writes back like, no, I just need tuning. I already have upgrades. Yeah. And I was like, oh, sorry, man. We don't do 6-liter tuning here. But if you're looking for somebody, the guys at Innovative Diesel, they're the number one in the market. Yep. Now, this gentleman was a little surprised, I think, when I told him that we don't do tuning for the 6-liter.
And then recommend and hype another company.
Yeah. So his conversation in mine went a little bit different route than I expected. But the reason that I recommend Innovative is because I actually got a chance to talk with Eric and AJ, and they're probably
very knowledgeable.
Two of the smartest diesel guys I have ever spoke to. I think there is no way we could do a clip show without including this highlight from 2020.
Diesels are the thing. Here's the software. Have fun. So I went and bought a 2003 6-liter, started playing with the software, and I hit the drag strip. So and I'll keep this short because I could talk about it forever. But I went through the drag strip and I was racing against 4 guys, and they had 7.3s. A buddy of mine, Greg DePron, Doc Boy, he was real popular on the forums. He's pretty semi-retired from the industry now, but he had a 7.3 down there running, full bigger turbo injectors, nitrous. And here comes Eric up to the line with the 6-liter that nobody really knows about. And Greg bust out like a 1280, and I ran through it like 1350 and a quarter mile. And he was like, oh my gosh, what do you have done to this truck? So I popped the hood and it was just a tune. We didn't have intakes, exhaust, or anything back then. It was just a tune. So Greg posted it online and everybody called us a liar. They swore I sprayed nitrous. So that's after that, I was hooked.
All right. I like that. You think about, I just want to kind of go back to that. You think of 6-liters and you have 2 individuals that are passionate, as you can tell from that clip and that interview. They literally took the biggest basket case diesel platform and perfected it, right?
Yeah.
So it's just an eye-opener. There's a lot of love for trucks. Speaking of love for trucks, right? We had Josh McCormack back in May, and the interview title was I Love Trucks, Guns, and Bacon. Josh is an extremely enthusiastic diesel enthusiast and a professional, right? He works over at Diesel Power Driven Diesel, right? Huge on social media. He has a bunch of cool truck projects. He posts and documents everything. He's a great guy. I love when we have opportunities to talk to him. But we'll kick it over to his enthusiastic clip here.
I would say the biggest challenge is definitely tuning. Obviously, I rely heavily on Gordon, and I just give him really inexperienced feedback. But I would say tuning's been pretty hard. Setting up the fuel system, figuring out how big return lines needed to be. And then, I work for Power Driven Diesel, and they do the trans work. It's been really hard getting a tranny to stay in there because you're asking it to do so many different things, right? I want it to do rolling burnouts into overdrive, and I want it to still sit and stop and go traffic. And last year we were stress testing it. We had my truck on a gooseneck hooked to the 05 doing 4-wheel drive boosted launches with it. And, we seem to have it. This is the most miles I've gotten on it without having any issues. So far, so good. We really been hitting the R&D. We've been shattering planetaries. Second gear bands are just kind of a thing now that it likes to eat through. And It's been really hard on like the forward clutch pack. And we this year we kind of changed it up a little bit because again, most guys will sled pull with it, or they'll daily drive with it, or they'll tow with it, or they'll drag race with it. I want a 7,200 pound truck to be able to do all four at 13 to 1,500 horsepower. I don't care what tranny you put in there. That's asking a lot. So we're getting really good at trans work.
Man, Josh was a lot of fun, and you can hear it there. But I think another one that I really liked hearing from was Trent Skinner, who's an ODSS competitor. Yep. Now going into the middle of last year wasn't the greatest for making all the events.
Yeah.
They still had a few. That's awesome. But yeah, Trent Skinner I think is going to be another one that you guys are going to love to hear from.
So as of today, I'm currently setting it up to try to run 670 and ODSS. I love that series, man. It's a great series. Started racing it full time last year and ran 770 and ET. And this winter kind of got a little bit of crazy. Went to pull the bed, and I was like, I have a really good friend that he runs 770 as well. And, he was like, well, let's start messing with it. So, went through the rear end, mounted the shocks vertically, got a set of QA1 adjustable shocks, put a fuel cell in it, put a set of trans coolers in it, cow tracks, 2 leaves, the whole 9 yards on the rear, rewired the truck, and then started building the engine, man. Still staying with the stock bottom end for right now until maybe Robb decides to get mad at me. But as far as that, I'm trying to run 670 with the weight, not so much the horsepower. So less weight, not as hard on parts, but I don't know. We'll see. I have a 6.7 in my garage too, ready to go. So if 5.9 ends up not being happy with me, I can go definitely to the 6.7. So
going fast.
Yep.
Having a lot of experience.
Yep.
Knowing what you're doing, and then talking. With our next clip is going to be from Anthony Bruneni, who's homegrown here at Duramax Tuner. What do you want to say about Chach?
What I think is a nice transition there is when you think of Trent Skinner, you're talking to someone who is aged in the market. Okay, he understands the industry to some degree. He's advanced when it comes to diesel modification, diesel racing, and whatnot. And then you flip script and you become a little bit more humbled and talk about someone who is starting in the diesel industry. And everyone starts here at one point or another.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the modifications ain't easy really hits home, because Paul, you, myself, Nick, the owner, Calibrated Power Duramax Tuner, we all started from the same place. Right?
Yeah.
And
doing it the wrong way.
Doing it the wrong way. Some still do, some learned, right? But it's just it's a reminder that we all start somewhere, right? And what you want to take from that and how you want to grow and learn and gain that knowledge, it's just we weren't all experts at one point.
That's right, man. Yeah. Hey, and by the way, if you want to follow Anthony along on Instagram, I believe he's at Rusty LOY.
Yeah. His LOY is Rusty.
Hit him up.
Good for him.
Welcome to the Diesel Performance Podcast. This is Justin Tyson.
And Chris Empke.
And as you're probably aware, Paul is not here. He's probably celebrating the 4th. Chris, do we have any idea what he's doing?
No.
Yeah, no idea. We have no idea what Paul's doing. But, I'm sure none of you miss his voice. I know Chris definitely doesn't. But it'll be nice to take a break. But anyway, we also are joined by a gentleman that works with us that is a diesel enthusiast to the max. Chris, he's like a little brother to you. Let's talk to him. Who is it?
Oh, man. So we have Anthony Bruneni. Anthony's been with us over at the shop now for a few years. He started off as kind of like a customer support guy, and now he's in a sales role in the organization. He's got a couple cool Duramaxes over the years. So, Anthony, how are you, man?
Dude, I'm good. It only took 3 years before I got on a podcast. I'm pretty stoked about it.
Man, Anthony's one of those guys that when he gets put into an odd situation or like a new situation that, he has looked up to for some time, he gets really sweaty palms. So, Justin, you should check his palms.
They are extremely red.
Yeah.
Like, he literally held them up, and I'm like, damn, dude.
That is now my 05 LOY. It was, ever since I was a kid, like, quick background, my dad's always had red vehicles. Like, he had 2 red Trans Ams, so, like, red was the color for me. And I know you were helping me for a while, and everyone here knows it had to be either like a VVT truck, so an LOY or an LBZ. It had to be crew cab and red. And then, I think we were hanging out and you told me, hey, I got this guy in Marketplace selling a red LOI with relatively low miles. And we took like a 4-hour trip to go pick up the truck. And I feel like, the rest is history. We're at where we are now with the truck.
So then we have Byron Sedore from Trucks of Ontario.
Speaking of Instagram, Byron's our probably most famous Canadian Instagram guy. Man, Byron's just a good time. Honestly, he's still working with us as an admin on the Canadian diesel community Facebook group. So I get to talk to Byron on a very regular basis. Big shout out to Byron. We'll let him talk about himself.
Well, like you just said, it's basically it's more of a truck scene, more so than just a diesel scene. But yeah, it's truck enthusiasts. It started out as just a small Instagram page way back in 2013. And just one day I just decided to host a truck meet on like a Wednesday night in a Lowe's parking lot. And more trucks showed up than followers we had at the time. And I was I was amazed. I was like, we're on to something here. And obviously with the success of that first truck meet, word of mouth, and it got bigger and bigger. And so here today, now the page has grown to 30,000. The Facebook groups, 14,000 members. It's constantly active, buy and sell, looking for advice, everything that you'd want in a truck group, in a community. It's there.
Chris,
the next one was a popular one.
We did history of the Duramax, history of the Cummins, history of the Power Stroke at the end of 2019. Yep. And then when we came around towards quarter 4 of 2020, we were like, man, we really like doing those history episodes.
The histories are a good one. They, it's very educational.
But we didn't want to go and do like the history of Mahindra Roxor because it's 3 years old. So we thought we'd dive into specific.
Complicated.
Yeah.
So we did the history of Duramax turbochargers. I honestly didn't believe or think that it was going to take as much preparation time as it did.
Check. But I really thought I know all the turbos.
I learned something from that, and it's cool when, granted, I haven't been in school in years and I was never very good in school when I was in school, but doing research on something that you enjoy and learning something from it and something that you deal with on a day-to-day is really cool. So let's just kick it over to that.
We are diving into the history of Duramax turbocharging. Duramax has been around since 2001. They're still running today. It's always been a 6.6 liter. It's the only manufacturer that's held out the displacement throughout their entire life since 01. So I think it's going to be a cool topic. I used a lot of resources for this. The ones that I wrote down were DuramaxHub.com, one of my favorite places to go, iHigh-turbo.com, Diesel International, Driving Line, specifically the Duramax history. All of the lessons that were by Mike McLaughlin, there's like 1 through 7, I think it is. They were all awesome. Great job, Mike. Also used Diesel Power Magazine. I used an article that was the 01 to 04 Chevy LB7 Duramax. Used Diesel Resource. I used GarrettMotion.com. I went around and tried to find as many places as we could to pull this info together. Now, Chris, you and I have quite a bit of, I call it tribal knowledge around these turbos, right? We deal with them every day and we've talked about them for years. I thought I'd let you kick it off with the LB7.
Yeah. So what's the LB7 is such an iconic platform, I feel, in diesel. Okay. Yeah. It was the first on the market in this light duty pickup, medium duty pickup trucks, whatever you want to call them, common rail injection, right?
That's the big one.
It's the big one, and they packed a big turbocharger, all things considered, to produce some pretty respectable power.
Especially compared to its predecessor, where the 6.5 is what came before the LB7s. Yep. And I know on my 6.5 and probably all of them, there's a big sticker on the intake that says, do not spray ether.
Yep.
Because it will explode this turbo.
And I think a couple of the things that made this engine so cutting edge, the common rail injector and common rail injection system, that's the big thing that pops up. But it was an iron block with aluminum cylinder heads. It had the Allison trans, which was a big deal, and to this day is still deemed a big deal. Yes. You always hear the guys, if I get a Cummins with an Allison behind her,
on a Ford chassis.
Always Ford, yeah. Jesus. But, the Duramax came out in 01 with, swinging hands, like it had something to prove. It had forged steel rods with aluminum pistons, 300 horsepower, 520 foot-pounds of torque. Now, let's put this in perspective, okay? If you were to have purchased a 01 Cummins of this year, it was at best a whopping 235 horse.
Sorry, 7.3 was even lower, wasn't it?
7.3s were under 200 horsepower.
Yeah.
Like I think like 190, 200 and something, like very, very
Real
low. So legitimately 300 horse, 500 foot-pounds of torque out of the gate, again, swinging, right?
You know how the 2019 Cummins came out with the high output and the 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, and it was like, it's a huge deal.
Yeah.
One, pretty short time span. We're talking about just 19 years. We're almost doubled our torque output in highest torque of an available diesel. But just think about like the Duramax and the Ford in that same year of 2019s are in the like 800 to 900 range of foot-pounds of torque. So they, like Cummins, they have the most, but not by a huge leap.
Yeah.
It does not take much to catch them. In the Duramax, getting 500 foot-pounds out of a 7.3, it's possible.
Yeah.
But you're putting some money into it for real.
Yeah.
And at Cummins, we know we can do it, but again, not the design from the factory.
No, I mean, especially when you're talking these years, I mean, it's very easy to take this 300 horse, 500 foot-pound truck to 400 horse, 700 foot-pounds really easily. Like, snap your finger, tune, you're there. It's crazy to see the technology. But back into this, it came with an iHigh RH G6 waist-gated turbocharger. Now, what's funny about this is not funny, but this is the only turbo in the Duramax lineup that's non-variable vane.
That's right, yeah.
Only the only iHigh charger.
That's right, the only iHigh. They got away from the iHighs pretty quickly. All right, guys, bringing experts on the show is how we started.
Yeah.
That's literally what we used to say was we want people to come on the show who are an expert around the diesel performance community and just talk about what they know about. And this was an opportunity where I think somebody from their media department over at Peak, the manufacturers of Blue Def and Blue Def Platinum, they reached out to me saying like, "Hey, we see you have a diesel show. We want to bring our CEO onto your show."
Yeah.
So I looked up and I watched an interview with a guy in like his corporate media person interviewing him, which was like just softballing him questions. I get it. I've had to do it. And I was like, oh man, this guy, he's smart and he's sharp, like the CEO is. But I right away was like, in this platform where like your suit and tie is not going to help your polish,
your presence at all.
We want somebody who's going to be super technical and be able to answer technical questions, and that's what we got. We got Jay, who's their senior project manager of Peak Blue Def Platinum. I never thought I would be interested talking about DEF, but here it is. You were directly involved on engineering this new brand of DEF fluid.
I've been the product manager for Blue Def for 2 years now, and from the very beginning, I've been involved in setting up and working on the project for Blue Def Platinum.
Awesome. So we're going to dive in and talk a little bit about that product, what makes it different, and why our listeners should maybe pay attention if we have emissions equipment on our trucks. But I wanted to start back at the beginning. Jay, I ask all of our guests, how did you first get your start working around automotive performance?
I think like a lot of guys, my father brought me into it. When we were 6, 7, 8 years old, the old man would bring us out in the driveway and say, "Hold this steering column up for me. Hold this thing so I can put the bolt in." So I got into it from a very early age, and I enjoyed working with my hands, and I started to pick up the various tasks, how to weld, how to wrench, how to do this and that. So I am one of the few, I think, in my type of profession where I'm completely hands-on, and I'll handle welding to construction to bodywork and painting, anything and everything.
Because you're an actual gearhead. We were talking before the show, and you actually have some fun projects and some cool vehicles floating around your day-to-day life.
Hey, not as cool as the stuff you got out back there, but I'm very happy with the things that I'm playing with.
Absolutely. Cool, man. Well, hey, let's help our listeners just kind of get a handle on this, because I know, guys, emissions equipment is your number one favorite thing to talk about. I want to hit the basics for the guys who are brand new to this stuff. What is DEF? Because I don't think the references to calling it hog piss are quite accurate.
It smells a little like hog piss. But DEF is a very simple fluid product. It is 67.5% automotive grade urea, a much purer grade of urea than you find in fertilizers and other products, and it's 32.5% deionized water. It's two simple components, but it has to be manufactured to very high standards of purity and quality to work correctly in diesel emission systems.
I'm still upset that I wasn't there for that interview. Right, I'm just going to start there. But I did listen to it several times. You know, it's something where you think about DEF fluid, right? It's not going to add performance, but if you buy a newer truck, you kind of have to use it, right?
Yeah.
So it's good to be educated on that.
Do you know Jay was the first one we had back in the studio in a long time?
Yeah.
And so when we're in the studio, a little behind the scenes on podcasting, we do a sound check every time we have people in.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get up and I'll say something stupid like, "Hey, tell me what you had for breakfast." So they'll be like, "Oh, I had eggs and I had bacon," and then we adjust the sound levels to try to get them, just quieter than me because we all know I talk really loud.
Yeah, you do.
And then we know that your peaks, right? Like Chris is going to be good, totally
until I get excited about something.
Until he gets excited or laughs, and we know grab the knobs.
Yep.
But man, Jay reminded me that somebody will do sound check, and then the minute you say record,
done.
They then talk this loud. Jay was so good.
Damn it! Not your radio voice.
He was so good.
That's awesome.
But I did get a couple comments about the volume jump, and just so you guys know, well worth it. To me, I will listen. I will turn the volume down on my headset anytime I can get great content like that. So we would love to have Jay back.
And then, a little bit after that, back in the beginning of December, we went live with the Frank Kuperman of Revmax. I'm a big supporter of Revmax. I have a Revmax trans in my truck. I think Revmax is kind of leading the pack on new trucks. They're already starting to get involved with the 10-speed Allisons and stuff like that, which are really cool.
Yeah.
So it was an honor to get him on the podcast and do an interview. So I guess without further ado, let's kick it over to that clip.
The question I get nowadays is, I'm thinking about buying a new Cummins, and I'm looking at that 1,000 foot-pounds out of that ASIN, or getting a little bit standard output and losing a little bit of that torque, but going with the 68. Now, personally, I recommend to guys hey, if you're going to leave the truck tune only, and all you're ever going to do is put a tune on it, the ASIN's a good trans. I got no hard complaints about it. But if you ever want to turn the power up in the truck, if you ever want to do a turbo upgrade, if you ever want to go drag racing, sled pulling, having fun, well, you probably want to do the 68 and then put some investments into it. Would you say that's a pretty fair piece of advice for guys getting into these trucks?
I'd say that's dead on the money, what you just said there. We echo the same things on our calls when customers, we get a call or an email a day about this. If you're going to work your truck really hard and you're going to be towing super heavy with it all the time, you're better off, honestly, leaving the truck stock is probably your best option. It's going to last the longest. Now, is it going to be the fastest or it's not. But it's going to work. It's going to be a work truck. And that's the truck you're looking for, and you're just looking for a little small tune on top of it, then AS69 absolutely, hands down, is the way I would want to go if I was optioning one of these trucks out. Now, if you want to go crazy with it, and what I mean crazy is if you're going to be doing any fuel or you're going to be doing turbo upgrade at that point, you're going to start running into some brick walls that you're not going to be able to break through an AS69. Take it from us. 2 years ago, we had this great idea. Last second, our truck wasn't ready yet, our white truck, our 68 truck. So we went out and bought another truck, an AS69 truck. And I think that truck laid out, I think it was 1,300 horse at UCC a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But we didn't have time to mess with tuning with it. It was kind of last second we threw it together. And even now, we got rid of the truck maybe 6 or 8 months ago. And I'll tell you, no matter what we did with that truck, we can never make it shift right. And it had nothing to do with the trans. It was purely in the tuning side. They just don't do well with power. And it sucks because, the guts of that trans, its predecessor, the AS68, in our opinion here, is the worst diesel trans ever built. Put it on ever. Worse than we're talking worse than an E4OD or a 40100 back in the day. Okay.
That's a big claim.
junk, garbage. Okay. And the AS69, while it has the exact same layout internally, a lot of those flaws are fixed. And as far as clutch capacity, we've got all the clutch capacity in the world in those units now available. The problem is the way the valve body is designed, the way the solenoids work in that valve body, and the tuners, they've tried to get in there. No one's been able to fully tune one of those. If you pull the torque management off it, it won't shift. And listen, they've already been out. We're going on year number 8 right now.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever anything for them. So yeah, if you want to go a little faster, you're going to want the 68. And it's hard to believe you want the lighter duty training, but you do, because you invest some money into it. You can have a trans that can hold some serious power. You know, is it going to hold 1,500 horsepower? It's not. Forget the stuff you see on the internet, okay, about this. Someone has, like us with our 68, or there's a couple other ones out there, you know, in the 1,500 horse range.
Yeah.
Listen, you can do it for a weekend. You saw us at UCC. We drove the truck back and forth to UCC. We dragged it probably 10 or 12 times. We ran a 10, I think it's like a 10-2 pass on that thing. We dynoed, I don't know, 12 or I think it was like around 1,200 horse. So that particular day in the dyno, we turned it down a little bit. And we sled pulled with it, and we drove it back home. But listen, you're not going to be able to do that for 6 weeks in a row. It's not going to happen. And that's what people are expecting. You know, it's just not going to happen. So as long as you have reasonable goals, you can drive your truck reasonably, a 60 RFE will do the job.
All right, guys. Here at the end, there's a few that I went back, and after we were all the way done with our outline, we sat down and a few of us talked about, like, hey, man,
it's kind of hard not to bring this up.
It's kind of hard not to throw a few more in there. So one of the ones that really is near and dear to my heart was Larkin Motors. We had Jeff and Josh from Larkin Motors on. These guys have an awesome program up in the Northeast about veterans, helping veterans, where every month they bring in a veteran's vehicle and they do the repairs for free. So it's something that means a lot to me. Yeah. It's something that I think is really important. If you can get on and even just subscribe to their YouTube channel, I think that would be a help to them. Yeah. If there's something that you could do to participate or to help them further, I definitely think that you should take the opportunity and do that as well.
You're doing great stuff, man.
It's from Larkin Motors, LLC. I have Jeff in Gargiola and Josh Larkin. Guys, how the hell are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
I'm good. Let's make it easy for the listeners. Josh, what was the first car you ever drove?
First car I ever drove, Toyota Tacoma.
Oh, my God, I love it. What year?
It was like an 85.
You said indestructible Baja truck? I agree. Yep. All right. And Jeff, how about you?
Oh, mine's way better. 1994 Eagle Summit. White red.
Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about what the Veterans Helping Veterans program is?
So I joined Josh back in 2018, and we started working together. We're just thinking of ways that we could kind of give back, and we were dealing with someone helping us with a small business plan through the VA, and there was a lot of people he was helping out in need, and we figured, hey, people out there, veterans that need help, why don't we see what we can do to help them out any way we can? And we came out with this Veterans Helping Veterans thing where, they come, they tell us what's going on in their life, what's wrong with their car, and we kind of go from there and do all the work and labor for free to help.
And then how can we not wrap up the year and have some stuff with Mr. Wehrli himself?
Jason Wehrli. We tried to schedule Jason Wehrli to do a podcast, I want to say for 2 months solid. Yeah. And between my schedule faux pas and his schedule being busy, it was just impossible.
Oh, on top of that, then he's late. Right? I mean, but he sponsors the show. Technically, he owns us. He can do what he wants. But, and it worked out, though. I mean, he came, Tim and Nick in Tuning and R&D, they did his 2021, right, yep. his L5P. So it was kind of a 2 birds, 1 stone scenario. But it's always awesome to get Jason here. He is one of those guys where he is still to this day so enthusiastic. He bleeds diesel. All of the trucks, the conversions, the sled pull trucks, the street trucks, the projects, the R&D, everything that he does, he is true and through a real world life enthusiast that is very successful at what he does. His products and parts speak for themselves.
Sure.
But he's about it.
Well, it's so funny you say that, because what I was going to reference Jason Wehrli as is he reminds me of talking to like somebody with a teenager level of passion about a hobby, right? Where we're like, you're like, oh, this is the only thing that's
here,
cool. And but he's into motorsports, so it's not just diesel.
No, it's not just diesel. But
it's so much fun to talk to him.
Anyone, unless you're local here, the chances of you going to an ISP poll, probably slim to none. And Jason's at every ISP poll. So this son of a bitch works countless hours, owns a business, runs a business with him and his wife and his family, and they have a lot of employees, right? But then he jets out of work and goes pulling, and he's like the main sponsor, and he orchestrates that, and his wife is the ticket holder and collects payments and sign up and all of that. Like, the dude, he is someone that I think about my excitement getting into diesel 12 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And, once you see the first, 500 horse truck on the dyno, you're like, okay. 1,000 horse truck on the dyno, it's like, okay. The second and third 1,000 horse truck you see on the dyno, it's like, okay, been there, done that.
That's really
this
loud.
guy, it's the first time every time.
Yeah.
He just is about it.
No, for sure. So like we said, there's no way we could wrap this up without hearing from Jason.
Yeah.
If none of that mattered and this was my only hobby, I'd be building a superstock truck. No doubt.
You look like in a heartbeat you'd be doing it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You thought about this.
I had to talk myself out of it sometimes.
All right, guys. This year, one of the big things we did differently because we didn't have really big shows to go to was we got again back to our roots of asking our listeners to come on the show and talk about their trucks.
And that not to interrupt,
go,
but
please.
One of my favorite parts going back to the KJ Jones and the Diesel Power magazine was reading the rider reviews.
Yeah.
You would always get a couple pages worth of, reader rides that would be submitted to the magazine, and you would read, little tidbits and snippets of that. And this is kind of like a modern era of that. You get the guys on the phone, Paul does the, how the hell are you? How did you get into diesel? Right. And then they get into their purpose. And I think that's the big thing, the purpose of why they have the truck and the modifications and, their journey.
What's crazy, Chris, is when we first did it, I want to say Ryan Karbaum was our very first one ever. He didn't have a lot of modifications on his truck. It wasn't like he had a 1,500 horsepower
but that's not,
diesel power challenge truck.
That's not every person, though.
And that was the first time we had somebody on who wasn't necessarily an expert in their field. Yeah. It was just a real person with a real story. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I became very interested in that. And we chased it down for a while. And then life gets in the way and producing the show gets in the way. And all of a sudden, you have to back off on it. And then when COVID happened, we were really worried from the show standpoint of sustainability, of being able to justify not working for the amount of time that we put into this so we could work on the show, because it has to make sense, right? Like it just has to. And without those huge downloads that we get from doing the live shows, we were worried. So we decided we were going to go to 2 episodes a week, which is tough. I'll just be honest.
I mean, it's I didn't participate in every one of those. I know it's tough on you, but more importantly, it's tough on Justin.
There you go. And that's who has to stop doing another full-time job at the drop of a dime to cater to us to get this out. And the only way we could make 2 shows a week happen was by relying on our listeners. Yeah. So really and truly, I do want to say thank you very specifically and very emphatically to everybody who participated, everybody who signed up. I know there's a few out there that still haven't made airtime yet. Don't worry, we haven't forgot you. I have the recordings. We're just kind of waiting to put it together again. But yeah, from the bottom of my heart, guys, thank you so much. I want to give a shout out to everybody, and we're going to hear as many of those intros as Justin could find right now.
We're doing listener ride reviews, and today we're doing our very first one with Levi Marquez.
My start, it came from my brother and his bad luck with pickups.
Today we have on a very special guest, Blane Robb.
Easier to ask for forgiveness than it is permission. So you get home and you got to detune it so you can't find out that you tuned it up. And that's really where it got started.
Interviewing somebody who is the furthest away from us that we've ever had, Jack Anderson.
A 2003 Ford F-350 6-liter crew cab with the long bed. That's the only thing to have. Short beds are... You can't put a piece of plywood in it, so why have it?
I couldn't think of a better guy to see back on the show as one of our very first guests that we ever interviewed from the diesel industry back when we first started Diesel Ride Review. It's Dwight Kroon.
I think it was like a 1929 or 32 Mack truck, and they called it Old Number One.
And we used to take that truck to parades and truck shows, big truck shows, and big rig shows,
Our newest segment called Listener Ride Review. Today I have a very special setup. I have on Corey Fedor. How the hell are you?
Doing great, Paul. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you so much for being here, along with Joey Hull. Joey, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing? I started off with, I think I bought a Smarty, a used Smarty, and then so now the truck's, rolls some coal, which is cool because I'm at the time 19, 20 years old, and just like the Dodge, I start reading, and I come across this one form. It's like, hey, if you're blowing coolant out of your overflow tank, your head gaskets are probably bad. And if you let the truck sit overnight and the upper radiator hose is hard in the morning still, your head gasket's probably bad. So sure enough, I'm like, well, son of a bitch, I bought this truck with bad head gaskets on it, and I didn't even know what I was doing.
Today we have on a very special guest, Stephen Lux.
Growing up, my dad was always wrenching on stuff and just kind of stuck with it. A bunch of friends growing up had diesel stuff and finally said, all right, maybe I should get into this.
Today we have on a very special guest, Jerry Haveman.
I've always been around diesels. My dad was a long-haul truck driver, but as far as the light-duty diesels go, I don't remember the year, but it was the first year of the Power Stroke badge whenever they redesigned the engine. Late 90s, and I had a buddy of mine who bought an F-350 with the new Power Stroke on the farm, and we went for a ride in that thing almost every day, and it blew me away.
Today we have on a real OG. I believe our first ever listener ride review was done way back. God, I want to say 2016 or some shit. Ryan the Irish Karbaum.
Well, at first, it was just, I'm gonna get a Smarty. At first, it was high school. We're gonna make it cheap. We're gonna make it cheap and fast, and it's gonna blow smoke. But now, shoot, second gen swap on it. God damn, I can't remember my turbo size. 4677, something like that.
I have a really exciting guest on today, Matthew Scarpelli.
I think like 90% of everyone I've ever heard, my dad had a 2003 and a half 6-liter. That was the first truck I learned how to drive. And if I'm being totally honest with you, I fell in love with the concept of a truck before I fell in love with the concept of a diesel.
Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Eric Hallen.
Well, the first thing I did was a tuner, the basic stage one, I guess you could call, of a build, right? I did the deletes. I bought the 5-inch straight, turbo back exhaust, and then I did the EGR delete later on down the road. I've never did a tuner on any vehicle I've ever owned before, and I've had quite a few because I was always scared of those, messing something up or having a crappy tuner or not having the support to back you up when something does go wrong. So
today we have on special guest Brent Van Leeuwen.
So I bought it with 109,000 miles on it back in 2009, and it was about as bone stock as it gets. Pretty confident there was even some stock parts that weren't on there anymore. It was that stock. Started just adding some basic intake exhaust. Did throw a tuner on it, a Bank 6 gun, just to play around a little bit with it.
Today we have on Jake Barton.
I'm going to be honest, a lot of these modifications came from me having problems, but it's got a South Bend single disc clutch in it for now. The Stealth 64, put that in. FAS 165. I got a DPS 3rd gen manifold on it. Set a 88 over industrial injection nozzles. Just ordered some gauges and trying to save up for a pump right now.
I'm here today talking with Byron Jensen.
So it was actually my dad and my brothers. My dad rode in an OBS in like 97, old buddy style Ford Power Stroke. And my dad was diehard Chevy fan. I mean, he wouldn't even ride in a Ford. But for whatever reason, his friend convinced him to go ride in this OBS. And he's all like, I have never been in a vehicle that can tow a trailer like this and just go. And you don't even know what's back there.
without any further ado, today we have on Derek Riesman.
Yeah.
I said with total confidence, Derek Riesman.
So I needed a crew cab long bed. My wife and I had a big cab over camper, and my single cab 454 1991 Chevy wasn't cutting it anymore. So I found my LB7, exactly what I needed, crew cab long bed, lots of miles on it, roughly 340,000 when I got it. But, reading the post, the guy, was pretty in tune with his truck and everything. It was kind of one of the standard Craigslist ads that you see for an LB7. What I've learned now, 60,000 miles ago, the injector's replaced.
I'm so excited today to bring on Dusty Hoggett from 1023 Diesel up in Alaska.
Well, I got started with a Dodge, which...
Smart man.
We'll get into that later. No, I got a 98.5 Dodge right out of high school. It was a sexy truck. It was a black single cab, BP truck, single cab long bed. And I loved it. It was a manual. So first thing I did, I think the day I bought it, I went down and I bought a Smarty for it, which figured out later was I could have done better than that. So of course the next thing I did was to get an Edge, Juice with Attitude.
Sure.
And, tap the pump wire and make some real power.
Chris.
2020.
2020. Like I said before the show, all things considered, we had a great year. And that's hard to say, I think, for a lot of people. But,
it is.
But I think the podcast had a great year. Let's talk a little bit about 2021, man. Like, we're wrapping this up. What do you want to tell the listeners about 2021?
Paul and I have already put together a game plan to pre-plan, right? So, we look back, put ourselves in the listener's shoes. What would we want to hear? And I think the downloads speak for themselves from the listeners, like the DIY stuff with Jeremy Garnett in the shop. Like that's popular. So doing more of that DIY stuff, getting some real world guys in the shop. This is what we saw. This is what we did. And kind of like a day in the life, right? Yeah. I think that's huge. I also think getting some more of that technical content with the guys in our R&D and tuning with Tim and Nick, and, not boring anyone with the nerdy stuff that they deal with. But at the same time, like, you want to tune your truck, you kind of want to know what the heck's going on.
Well, yeah, and that's what I love about the podcast is we get a chance to bring those super technical topics in, and then dummies like me can help distill it down to where I have to make them keep repeating it until I understand it. And if I understand it, you as a listener get it.
So, that one I'm really, that topic I'm really excited about. And I personally think, we talk about what we deal with, what you and I deal with in the day-to-day. In your day-to-day has definitely changed over the last 8 years of employment.
Sure.
The last 7 years for me being here, it's still very similar, but I do get to pick and choose certain things that I deal with, right? So I think getting some of our guys that are on kind of the front line and customer support and whatnot on board and talking about some of the things that they've ran into. It's experience. Like at the end of the day, guys listen to this because they want the experience, they want the knowledge, they want to know. And I think some of that real world day-to-day stuff is going to be huge. So a lot of it for us is pre-planning, and kind of being able to deliver educational content.
Yeah,
is the best thing I can say. That's my main focus. And I know we've talked about it, but that's kind of where I'm at going into 2021.
Absolutely. Yeah, man, I'm excited. I think we're going to go out for some interviews. So I think we're going to try to do a good mix this year.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep up a steady pace.
We did get shamed. We did get shamed on the podcast Facebook page for not doing as many of the bigger interviews and stuff like that. So that's one of those.
There's always somebody bitching.
2020, it was a rough year, but I mean there's a lot of cool things going into 2021 that I think we're going to be able to kind of circle back and revamp to get a wide range of content.
Yeah.
Best way to put it.
I agree. Yeah. So I'm there with you, man. For today, guys, this has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
Thank you so much for listening.
All right, guys.
All right, guys. All right, guys.
All right, guys. All right, guys. All right, guys. All right, guys. All right, guys. How the hell are you? How the hell are you? How the hell are you? How the hell are you?